Good evening. Welcome to Wednesday night Bible study again. We're in the book of 1 Samuel. We're going in chapter 7. Kind of leading up to this, Israel was in the time of the judges, and Eli had been the high priest, but his sons were wicked, so God rejected Eli as high priest and his sons as high priests. And so he had appointed Samuel to replace Eli. Samuel was given to Hannah as her only son to begin with. She had other sons later, but he was the son of promise, and Hannah promised to give him back to the Lord, and so he served in the temple. And then it came to pass that the Philistines attacked the Israelites. The Israelites went to fight against the Philistines, and they took the Ark of the Covenant kind of as a good luck charm to fight the Philistines. But because they were sinning against God, and because they had no relationship with God, they were defeated before the Philistines, and the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant and killed Eli's two sons. And news came back to Eli. He was sitting in a chair. He was an old man, a very heavy man. And when he heard the news that the ark was captured and his two sons had been killed, that he fell over backwards, broke his neck, and died himself. The Philistines didn't like having the Ark of the Covenant because God plagued them while the ark was there. They couldn't handle the presence of God. They got tumors and they had a disease and were infertile. So finally, they returned the Ark of the Lord to Israel. And that's kind of where we come up on chapter 7. Chapter 7, it starts and says, So the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took the Ark of the Lord. They took it to Abinadab's house on the hill and consecrated Eleazar, his son, to guard the ark. It was a long time, 20 years in all, that the ark remained at Kiriath Jearim. And all the people mourned and sought after the Lord. So the Ark of the Covenant was put in this guy's house and really was just there to protect it, kind of as a temporary thing. But they were procrastinators, and the Ark of the Covenant never got returned to Bethel with the tabernacle. And so it stayed in this guy's house for 20 years, not just 1 or 2 months, but a year or 2 years. It's like those projects you have around the house, and you always say, I'm going to get around to doing it, and you never do. And that's what happened. The Ark of the Covenant stayed there for a long time. Well, going on, and it says that, and Samuel said to the whole house of Israel, if you're returning to the Lord with all your hearts, then rid yourselves of the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths, and commit yourself to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. So the Israelites put away their Baals and Ashtoreths and served the Lord only. And so they got rid of their idols. And, they had idols like all the nations around them, carved images out of wood and stone and precious metals. They were dead. They were not alive, but they bowed down to him because that's what the nations around them did. They had the one true God who was living, and they rejected him for these things that were meaningless. But here they decided to purify themselves and return unto the Lord. And they gathered together to a place called Mizpah. So Samuel said, assemble all Israel in Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you. When they assembled at Mizpah, they drew water and poured it out before the Lord. On that day they fasted, and there they confessed, we have sinned against the Lord. And Samuel was leader of Israel at Mizpah. I'm not sure exactly what it means they drew water and poured it out before the Lord, but you look at this is a rededication church service. And the water, I think, symbolized their purification, that they were surrendering themselves to the Lord again. And they were having a great church service. And then, when you're having a great church service, the enemy likes to attack. And that's what happened. In verse 7, well, the Philistines heard that the Israel had assembled at Mizpah. The rulers of the Philistines came up to attack them. And when the Israelites heard it, they were afraid because of the Philistines. They said to Samuel, do not stop crying out to the Lord for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines. Then Samuel took a suckling lamb and offered it up as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. And he cried out to the Lord on Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. Now Israel, before they went up presumptively against the Philistines, thinking they were strong enough, they were going to win, they had their good luck charm of the ark. And here, they weren't so prideful. They realized that they could not do it in their own strength. They needed the Lord. And so they said to Samuel, cry out to God for us. How many times when we're facing a battle do we ask someone, please pray for me? We're going to take a test at school and we say, Lord, please pray for me, or parents, please pray for me. Or we're going for a job interview and we say to our friend, please pray for me. We need people praying and interceding for us, because in this life, the battle is not ours, it is the Lord's. And when we turn to God, he intervenes on our behalf. And that's what he did for the Israelites. Verse 10. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew nearer to engage Israel in battle. But that day the Lord thundered with a loud thunder against the Philistines and threw them into such a panic they were routed before Israel. Then the men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them all along the way below Beth-kar. So wonderful image here. They were coming up, the Philistines coming up to attack the Israelites. The Israelites were kind of just having a church service, and they were cowering in Mizpah, so to speak. And as Samuel prayed and sacrificed to the Lord thundered against the Philistines. Can you imagine the Philistine army there? They're getting ready to win this battle again like they had the last time. They were confident in themselves, and all of a sudden they hear this boom, boom, and it rings out, and all of a sudden, what's that? What's that? Where'd that come from? Boom, boom. It's like, it's before gunpowder, but like someone shooting guns at them or cannons at them. And they suddenly were all in fear, and they started to scurry this way and run that way, and they were routed before Israel, and Israel won the battle that day. And it wasn't theirs, it was the Lord's that won the battle for them. So it says in verse 12, then Samuel took a stone and set up between Mizpah and Shen. He named it Ebenezer, saying, thus far the Lord has helped us. So the Philistines were subdued and did not invade Israelite territory again throughout Samuel's lifetime. So Samuel put up a marker as a reminder, and he called it Ebenezer. Ebenezer means, thus far the Lord has helped us. And it's good to put markers in our lives when God has helped us to remember those times, because they build our faith for the future. So the Israelites, every time they passed this way on this road, they would see that mark and say, Ebenezer, remember the time that God thundered against the Philistines and we won the victory. Remember the victory that we won here. And we need to have those in our lives, because the enemy will try and discourage us and defeat us and say, God's not really with us. But no, we can say, remember our Ebenezer. Remember. I think of times in our life where God has helped Donna and I, when we adopted our son Christopher, when we went to buy our first house, when we moved up here to Lancaster, and we went to buy a house here, and God guided us and led us and protected us financially. I remember the time that I had a ruptured appendix, and I was actually living with it for about a month. I should have been dead, but God protected me and used doctors to heal me in his own healing touch, and that's an Ebenezer in our life. What are your Ebenezers? Remember those and have those as marker points for you. So the latter half of verse 13, throughout Samuel's lifetime, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. The towns from Ekron to Gath that the Philistines had captured from Israel were restored to her, and Israel had delivered the neighboring territory from the power of the Philistines. And there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. Verse 15, Samuel continued as judge over all Israel the days of his life. From year to year, he went on a circuit from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, judging Israel in all those places. Now, he was one of the first circuit riders. Remember the Methodists in the 1800s? They were circuit riders where the preachers would go from one city to the next, kind of in a circle. That's what circuit means. And they would annually kind of repeat. There weren't enough pastors for all the churches and towns, so these circuit riders would ride around preaching in the different churches. Well, that's what Samuel did. Now, Bethel and Mizpah are right next to each other, only a few miles away from each other on the hillside. Bethel's to the north, Mizpah's to the south. And then Gilgal, though, is down the hill. These Bethel and Mizpah were up on the hillside on the Judean highlands. And then for Gilgal, they'd have to go down the hill, and it was next door to Jericho. It would be about eight, maybe 10 miles away. And so he'd make this circuit every year and he'd stay in each place. And then it says, but he always went back to Ramah, where his home was. And there he judged Israel, and he built an altar there to the Lord. So he had his place where he was had an altar to the Lord. And I think that's important for us in ministry. Whenever you're serving the Lord, yeah, you go out and you do your work, whatever it is. If you're teaching a class, if you're working in the homeless encampment, if you're giving out food, you go to your place of service, wherever that is. But you always need to have your Ramah. You always need to have your home where you go and build an altar to the Lord, where you're receiving from the Lord and you're spending time in the Lord's presence, so that then you can go out and do the work of the Lord. Remember to always have your Ramah. You need to have your Ebenezer, the places where you remember where God won the victory for you, where God helped you. And then you need to have your daily devotions with God, your Ramah, where your altar is. So you have the events in your life, the high places. Remember, another Ebenezer for me, just remember, it was when I was baptized in the Holy Spirit, spoke in the language that God gave me. That was a high point. That was an Ebenezer. But then daily, I have to have my Ramah with the Lord, the place where I hear the word of the Lord. And I know the Ramah is the name of a town. It's a different word, but it also refers to the Ramah of the word in our life, the living word of God that's spoken to our hearts. So here we come to chapter 8. In chapter 8, Israel is tired of having a theocracy, and they want a monarchy. So when Samuel, verse 1 of 8, grew old, he appointed his sons as judges for Israel. The name of his firstborn son was Joel. The name of his second was Abijah. And they served at Beersheba. And this is sad, verse 3. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. They weren't as bad as Eli's sons, but they were crooked, dishonest. Here, the people would come to the judges to get a fair, impartial verdict, but they would go to the highest bidder. Whoever paid them the most would win. And they stole from the people and took bribes. And so they were dishonest and crooked. And all of Israel knew this. And so Israel was tired of this. They had Eli for a while, and his sons were wicked. Now they had Samuel. They loved Samuel, but his sons were wicked. And so they decided, we want to be like all the nations around us. Verse 4. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. But when they said, give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to him, listen, all that the people are saying to you is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king, as they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly and let them know what the king who will reign over them will do. So, when the people came and asked Samuel, hey, we want a king, that broke Samuel's heart. It's like, didn't I do a good job? I mean, don't you like what I'm doing? I mean, I've served you well, just like a slap in the face. And God said, nah, Samuel, it's not against you, it's against me. And a lot of times when you're serving, things will happen. People may say things, people may do things, and it hurts. But recognize you're just a servant of the Lord. You're serving God. And when people are like that, it's not you they're attacking, it's the Lord they're attacking. So don't take things too personally. When I was first in ministry, I took things personally, and then I realized often it wasn't me at all. It's what the individual was going through and the things going on in their life. And so it gave me a different perspective. So that one, I could minister to people, not out of insecurity, but out of my security in the Lord. And so it's important to recognize that it's the Lord you're serving. So they asked for a king, and God said, basically, warn them, because this is what a king's going to do. The next couple verses, Samuel lays it out to him. Verse 10, Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "This is what the king who will reign over you will do. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses. They will run in front of his chariots. Some will be assigned to be commanders of thousands and commanders of fifties, and others to plow his ground, to reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take a tenth of your grain and your vintage and give it to his officials. Your men servants and maid servants and the best of your cattle, donkeys, he will take to use for his own use. He will take a tenth of your flocks and you yourselves shall become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king that you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day." So basically, God was saying to him, "Hey, you want a king? You've had a theocracy. I've not charged taxes. I've not taken your kids or your servants or demanded from you these things. But you have a king. Guess what, guys? The king's going to charge taxes. He's going to take 10% of everything. And I'll tell you, it's gotten much worse in today's world. We're up to, depending on your tax bracket, 15 to 50%. And he's going to have taxes, but not just taxes. He's going to conscript your children into his service, whether in the army or to serve in his palace. And so these Israelites were complaining about the Philistines, and they wanted a king to protect them from the Philistines, but who's going to protect them from the king? And you see in Israel's history that the kings became like that, and they demanded that from people. So here we come to verse 19. But the people refused to listen to Samuel. "No," they said, "we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles." When you hear that, what is the main thing that you hear that's wrong in that statement? I think, then we'll be like all other nations. What other nation did God thunder against their enemies? What other nation did God drown their enemies in a sea? What other nation did God fight for like God fought for the Israelites? And they forgot so quickly all the things that God had done for them. And they said, "We want to be like the other nations. We don't want to be unique in this world." But I'll tell you something. When you're different is when things get done. When you're different, that's when the Lord works on your behalf. But when you're like the world, you lose the presence of God in it. And that's what's happening with Israel here. They wanted to be like the world, and they wanted a king to fight their battles for them, not the Lord. I think of, the time that the Assyrian army surrounded King Hezekiah in Jerusalem, and Hezekiah cried out to God, and God sent an angel in the Assyrian camp and killed 180,000 soldiers. Now, who do you want fighting for you, really? Do you want the king fighting for you, or you want the Lord fighting for you? The king was holed up in the city and couldn't do a single thing, and the Lord went out and defeated the army. And so quickly we forget. That's because I think the people forgot their Ebenezer. They forgot the times in their life when God had fought on their behalf. And because they didn't have a Ramah, they were not spending time in the presence of the Lord. And so they wanted to be like the other nations. Verse 21, when Samuel heard all that the people said, he repeated it before the Lord, and the Lord answered, "Listen to them and give them a king." Then Samuel said to the men of Israel, "Everyone go back to his town." Let's go on to chapter 9. There was a Benjamite, a man of standing, whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah, Benjamin. He had a son named Saul, an impressive young man without equal among the Israelites, a head taller than any of the others. And so Saul had the look of a king. He was a tall man, and his family, even though it was a small family, the Benjamites were the smallest of the tribes, it gave the heritage of his father. Verse 3, now the donkeys belonging to Saul's father Kish were lost. And Kish said to his son Saul, "Take one of the servants with you and go and look for the donkeys." So he passed through the territory of Benjamin, but they did not find them. When they reached the district of Zuph, Saul said to the servant who was with him, "Come, let's go back, or my father will stop thinking about the donkeys and start worrying about us." But the servant replied, "Look, in this town there's a man of God. He is highly respected, and everything he says comes true. Let's go there. Perhaps he will tell us the way we will take." 7. Saul said to his servant, "If we go, what can we give the man? The food in our sacks is gone. We have no gift to take the man of God. What do we have?" The servant answered him again. "Look," he said, "I have a quarter of a shekel of silver. I will give it to the man of God so that he will tell us what way to take." Formerly in Israel, if a man went to inquire of God, he would say, "Come, let us go to the seer," because a prophet of today used to be called a seer. So, excuse me, it was customary to bring a gift to the prophet when you came to get a word from him, or the seer. And the word seer would be they saw into the spiritual realm, or saw into the future, saw into the heart of God. And another thing that's interesting is always like Saul didn't know what to do, but he turned to his servant. The servant had an answer, and the servant had the direction. And it's good to have people alongside you that can help you in that way. Verse 10, "Good," Saul said to his servant, "come, let's go." So they set out for the town where the man of God was. As they were going up the hill to the town, they met some girls coming out to draw water, and they asked him, "Is the seer here?" Verse 12, "He is," they answered. "He's ahead of you. Hurry now. He has just come to our town today, for the people have a sacrifice at high place. As soon as you enter the town, you will find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. The people will not begin eating until he comes, because he must bless the sacrifice. Afterward, those who are invited will eat. Go up now. You should find him about this time." And so they went up to the town. As they were entering it, there was Samuel coming toward them on his way to the high place. Now the day before Saul came, the Lord revealed this to Samuel. "About this time tomorrow, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him leader over my people Israel. He will deliver them from the hand of the Philistines. I have looked upon my people, for their cry has reached me." When Samuel caught sight of Saul, the Lord said to him, "This is the man I spoke to you about. He will govern my people." God had prepared Saul for being king, and God had showed Samuel that Saul was to be the man. And God had arranged Samuel and Saul to meet there using Saul's servant. That's just amazing how God does that. And verse 18, Saul approached Samuel in the gateway and asked, "Would you please tell me where the seer's house is?" "I am the seer," Samuel replied. "Go up ahead of me to the high place, for today you are to eat with me, and in the morning I will let you go and will tell you all that is in your heart. As for the donkeys you lost 3 days ago, do not worry about them. They have been found. And to whom is all the desire of Israel turned, if not to you and all your father's family?" It's like, "Samuel, how did you know all that? How did you know that I was searching for the donkeys? How do you know where the donkeys are?" And it's amazing how God had just told Samuel all the details, and God had arranged this meeting. I wonder if God put it in the heart of the donkeys to run away. I think he did, but God had arranged this meeting. Verse 21, Saul answered, "But I am not a Benjamite, but I am not a Benjamite, but am I not?" Sorry. God, I knew I wasn't reading right. "But am I not a Benjamite from the smallest tribe of Israel, and is not my clan the least of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why do you say such a thing to me?" Then Samuel brought Saul and his servant to the hall and seated them at the head of those who were invited, about 30 in number. And Samuel said to the cook, "Bring the piece of meat I gave you, the one I told you to lay aside." So the cook took up the leg with what was on it and set it in front of Saul. Samuel said, "Here is what has been kept for you. Eat, because it was set aside for you on this occasion. From the time I said I have invited guests." And Saul dined with Samuel that day. And Samuel had set aside the meat for Saul in advance. And it was a good portion, and it represented the kingly portion that Saul was to take. Verse 25, after they came down from the high place to the town, Samuel talked with Saul on the roof of his house. They arose about daybreak, and Samuel called to Saul on the roof, "Get ready, and I will send you on your way." What town were they in? Do you remember? If it was Samuel's house and his roof, they were in Ramah. So all this took place in Ramah. Again, get ready, and I will send you on your way. When Saul got ready, he and Samuel went outside together. Verse 27. As they were going down to the edge of town, Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the servants to go on ahead of us." And the servant did so. "But you stay here a while, so that I may give you a message from God." And the first part of chapter 10, then Samuel took a flask of oil, poured it on Saul's head, and kissed him and said, "Has not the Lord anointed you leader over his inheritance?" And I don't want to get in the next part because the next part is just amazing, the directions, but we'll look at that next Wednesday night. Thank you for participating in the Wednesday night service tonight. Remember to have your Ebenezers, those high points in your life where God helped you. Remember those. If you take a moment and write those down on a piece of paper and reflect on what God's done for you in your life, and then make sure you have a Ramah in your life every day, a place where you build an altar to the Lord. And God will direct you, God will protect you, God will lead you, God will give you insight, and God's blessing will be upon you. This Friday night, we have a drive-in barbecue. We're going to have pulled pork sandwiches, and we're going to have everyone just drive, and like we do in a drive-in service or the drive-in movie night, park your car, stay in your car. If you have to use the restrooms, they will be open for emergencies, but otherwise, please stay in your car. And our board is going to cook the food and serve it, and they will bring it to your car on a tray. It'll be in one of those black plastic containers, and there'll be chips, and you can choose a drink, and they will bring it to your car. You can eat in your car. We will provide napkins, but make sure you have plenty as well. And then the board is putting on a wonderful program. They'll have testimonies, and Paul Schott is going to be sharing about his family and how they survived World War II in the Philippines. An amazing story. You will want to be here to hear it. And so come out this Friday night. It begins at 6 o'clock at the church. And then we have our services on Sunday at 10:30 a.m., both online or in person at our facilities at 3250 East Lancaster Boulevard. You have a wonderful evening. God bless.